Yeah, yeah. Interpretation.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
You want to start?
When are we ready?
We are, sir.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to call to order the January 8th, 2024 regular meeting of the Granville Board of Education. Please join me, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome everyone that's here and on Zoom. Again, I'd like to thank Mr. Miller for outstanding job as president the last couple of years, and as I said earlier, look forward to continuing to work with everyone. Take the roll, please.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Ms. Shaw? Here. Mr. Cronk?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Dees? Here.
Approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw? Aye. Ms. Dees? Aye. Mr. Cronk?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
All right. Accommodations, Mr. Brown.
Okay, great. So, the crowd gathered in mass for the, can't see him though. Recognition, obviously the people watching this remotely can't see the massive crowd. Thanking the board for their service to this community. And we just went through the process of the organizational meeting, which identifies the president, vice president, but also, your additional contributions to this community. And I don't think people truly understand how vital you are to the governance and operations of the school district. Yes, you employ the superintendent and the treasurer to take care of the day-to-day, but ultimately, you provide the community's feedback and an opportunity to gain deeper perspective of community engagement and the ability to help then translate that into policies. And it's a critical position, and I think it's an extremely valuable position within the community, because public education is something that is a foundational aspect of our democracy. And so you have played a critical role in the leadership over the last, whatever your term has been. And we want to thank you. I want to talk specifically because Mr. Miller is transitioning from the presidency back into a membership position, and he has served the last 2 years, which has kind of been our regular cadence over the last couple of years of serving. And his disposition in reaching out to community members over the last couple of years has been, he's done it his entire career, but the last 2 years has been absolutely critical as we gained a better understanding of what people's interests were when it comes to funding of levies, income tax, property tax, you name it. Intentionally going out and reaching out to people, all different types of people who agree with us, people who don't agree with us, on a regular basis, and always attempting to communicate in the process. I think he's done a valiant job in that role, and I think you deserve a special recognition for that work that you've done. So thank you very much. Now the rest of you have to do something. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. So, we are a learning organization, and as a learning organization, I've created the tradition of providing books for the board members beyond the certificate of appreciation from the OSBA that is, I'm sure, on everyone's refrigerators at home. But This book in particular, I think, is important because it calls out some of the work that we've been doing recently. So this is a book that the leadership team has been reading. We're about finished with it. The name of it is Humility is the New Smart, Rethinking Human Excellence in a Smart Machine Age. And really it talks about what workforce is going to look like as we have more advances in technology. And what it comes down to as smart organizations and smart, the new smart is really what makes us human. Many of the things represented on our portrait of a graduate are things that they highlight in this book that will really define how people are successful. But it also talks about, legitimately, called out specifically, SDL, self-determined learning, as absolutely critical. Having curiosity, things that we've been advancing and saying agency and autonomy matter in workforce and in order to be successful in a smart machine age, because the computers will do a lot and they're doing more every single day, but ultimately it's the people behind the computers and the development that have to have the certain skill sets that continue to add value to our community. So I hope you enjoy the book. It's an easy read, and we've had a lot of deep conversations with the administrative team, just talking about how some of these concepts relate to our leadership of the organization. So as a governance team, it's only appropriate that you read along. So I will pass these out to you. As always, I've given you a little message at the beginning.
As always, it's the same message for everyone.
Thank you. Somebody. Thank you for calling me out. Yeah.
You said, don't compare me inside, because I
Yeah, I
would
do.
say that, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is.
And I think I referenced the three elements that I talked a little bit about in my message to you in front. So with that, I will conclude our accommodations, but also with just an additional thank you, because board stability matters, leadership matters, and I think we are an excellent example of stability of leadership at multiple levels, especially at the governance level. So thank you very much for your commitment to the school district. The community owes you a huge round of applause. So we'll do that on behalf of them. And as I sit down, Mr. Wolf, good luck in your presidency, and we appreciate your willingness to serve in that role. Thank you. Mr. Burnett.
Good evening. It's an honor to be Mr. Wolf's first board presentation. Mrs. Shaw's first as vice president. So hope you remember this moment for the rest of your lives.
Just remember, GES and GIS were really good. Really good. They
There will
set
be no
the bar
scooters or
high.
dancing, I'm sorry. So tonight we're going to give just a short presentation on some of the things that we're working with through my office with each of the buildings. Some things that you're going to hear more about as we get into the spring and summer and scheduling, and make some connections to some things you did hear from the previous presenters. The first thing that we're going to talk about is, last time Travis talked, at the last meeting, Travis talked about the science of reading provisions, specifically those under House Bill 33 that were passed this past year. And just to refresh your memory, there are 32 other states that have science of reading stipulations that they've passed. Some of them are materials related. You can only have certain materials. Some of them are professional development related. Some of them are just basic guidelines and not mandates. In Ohio, we are going to, and we are waiting on information from the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce on what these materials can be in Ohio, because we are going to have those stipulations. We've gotten little bits of information. One of the states that we've heard of for a model of this is Colorado. And if you go on Colorado's website, you can see how they list the materials that are allowed to be used in their K through 3 buildings from a reading and literacy perspective and from an intervention perspective as well. That's a list of all the states that have some form or another of this in place. But it all connects to, and what Travis talked about last time was the simple view of reading. You have a word recognition piece to language and reading comprehension, and a language comprehension piece. And those two things working together obviously is a very simple view of how the reading process works. But it's really the model that we're using to move forward towards the science of reading conversation. A little more realistic approach to this is this idea of Scarborough's rope. Again, you saw this at the last meeting, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But there are really two pieces of this, and especially at the younger ages and those foundational elementary years, there are different programs and different strategies that we use to satisfy the word recognition portion of the rope and the language comprehension piece of the rope. And that's where the Ohio's legislation specifically acts, that where they're going to require us to use certain curricular materials. That list was supposed to come out in the fall of this school year, got delayed to the early winter of this, and we still don't have a whole beginning at the end of January. This is for implementation in 24-25. But I want to stress that this is not something that we asked for. This is being done to every school in the state of Ohio. We had both parts of the rope covered by our programs that we are currently using. So you're going to hear a little bit about the programs that we're currently looking at to replace particularly units of study. That's the program here we are not going to be allowed to use anymore from a reading perspective in our K through 5 grade levels. So,
quick question. I hear the term science of reading, and I'm not exactly sure what that relates to. Is it really just strictly a set of curriculum materials, or is it a different philosophy of
No,
something
it's
that's
really
different than what we do now?
I think the easiest way, Thomas, is to, if you look at the words underneath language comprehension and word recognition,
Yeah.
the science of reading is, I think the biggest mistake people make is science of reading is phonics. And that's not the case. A good phonics program will have a lot of these different processes in there. The science of reading is scientifically backed best practices that have shown to help all students learn or grow as readers. What Ohio is banning is called the 3Qing system, but there's a lot of research out there to also suggest that we use 3Qing very frequently in our reading process, but they're only talking about K through 5. So they're not banning it, beyond that, which is an interesting shift. And you can, when you're talking about the science of reading, it's really all of these things combined, and then what's the best practice that relates to that. What they're doing then is looking at different curriculum materials and saying these things follow these best practices in this research base that we have really over the last 50, 60 years in terms of reading data that people have. So, to give you a little bit of a history lesson, I might get the years a little bit off on this, but in the 70s, whole language became very big, and then phonics became very big, and everybody seems like this pendulum goes back and forth. This isn't really a pendulum swing, it's just sticking to what do we actually know about data that points to making students successful readers in an age where that's going to become more critical than ever. That's what the science of reading is. Phonics is a component of that, but it's not just the phonics piece. So what we're looking at here is 3 different programs that we've selected. Now, we did a lot of research. So the selection criteria for this first was that the program we were looking at had to have high marks from EdReports and the What Works websites. Those are educational think tanks that do a lot of research and publish those for the federal government and other sources. So it's non-biased. It's not from the vendors themselves. It's not from the textbooks companies or anything like that. And they have specific criteria that do these programs meet the science of reading benchmarks. And it's usually like a red, green, or yellow. Obviously, green's the most positive piece, and that's what we're looking for. We looked at other states' lists, because if we're talking about the science of reading, we want to get a little heads up of what Ohio might be thinking would be on the list. What programs seem to appear on most of the 21 states that have materials requirements. And when you start putting those lists together, it really whittles down very fast in terms of the programs that might be available to us here in Ohio. And then finally, we ended with some presentation of those programs from vendors. With that criteria of, okay, what do we currently have that fits this particular narrative, and what are we going to need in the future. And that kind of led us to these 3 particular programs. One is Wit and Wisdom, and I'm going to jump back just to the road for a second. Wit and Wisdom only tackles this portion of the road, the language comprehension piece. So these are going to be books that teach kids about background knowledge, vocabulary, in the world they live in, lots of science topics, lots of social studies topics, things like that. It's not going to get into the decoding, sight recognition, and phonological awareness aspect of the program. The 95% group is the other side of the road. It is a word recognition program that's going to have these 3 pieces that are the main portion or the main parts of it. And then finally, Benchmark Advanced, which is called a core program. What that means, it has both sides of the road that's integrated into one particular program. So each of them fits different parts of the road, and the question you may have at this point is, well, why don't you look at all core programs if you have to replace these? And that's because when we used units of study, we knew that it did not have a lot of pieces that were really great in word recognition. So we've been using Foundations in Heggerty as our programs for that phonics piece, for lack of a better way to describe it, that word recognition piece for the last 6 or 7 years in our elementary school. So we wanted to look at if we're allowed to keep Foundations in Heggerty, which we're very confident that's going to be one of the things that shows up on this particular list later this month, then we would need to replace the language comprehension side, and we think Wisdom is the best choice for that. I'll go into why that might be the case as we go on. If we do have to look at a new phonics program, 95% group is a very highly rated, also on all of the other lists, so it's kind of an option that we can look at. Plus it has a K through 6 component. Foundations only goes up to 3rd grade. So if we are required to have this phonics program in grades 4 through 6, 95% group would be a logical curriculum that we could bring in there for that piece. When you get to grades 4 through 6, the phonics looks very different. It's more about word morphology at that point, teaching kids different roots and how words are constructed. And the science teachers will really appreciate that curriculum down the line, because it'll teach them a lot of the things that will make them better readers in a science classroom, like a biology classroom, for example. And then if we're required to have a core program, then obviously Benchmark Advanced would be the one that we thought rose to the top out of all the core programs that we looked. The frustrating piece for us is we cannot get a straight answer in terms of, are we going to allow it to keep Foundations in Heggerty and supplement the other side of the rope, or do we have to have this core program? We get ideas about what we think are going to be required, but there's no definitive answers yet. And with implementation across the state starting next school year, we want to get these materials in front of our teachers, we want to get them purchased right away, and we want to get professional development in place, not just for August next year, but for the spring and summer of this year for staff that want to dive into it right away. So there's a high amount of frustration here, but everybody's in the same boat, so we'll make our way through it and make the best of it. We just have been very adamant, like, do not delay this one more time. We need this information yesterday, please. Especially if you're going to mandate it to us. So Wit and Wisdom, the pros of this were, right when it was first developed, Foundations was already created. So they actually partnered with Foundations to make that a cohesive program that they could be utilized with. So it has a grades K through 6 component, so we can, it covers all the grades that are required by this particular mandate. The topics are very developmentally appropriate, and in some cases they even match up with science and social studies. That's more at the younger grade levels than the upper grade levels for sure. And it also has a program called GEOS that actually brings decodable readers into students' hands that are still part of that knowledge base that they're growing. And then the thing that kind of ties it all together for me is we already use Eureka Math as our math program that we're using, and that's made by the same manufacturer. So the online components that teachers have access to, the way they set up the materials, is something that our K through 3 teachers are very familiar with because they're self-contained classrooms. So it's the same login, the same setup, which just brings some familiarity and maybe a little less anxiety about switching to something new. The cons of this, again, it's only the language comprehension portion of the rope, so we can't just use this in isolation. We would have to have the other side, which Foundations Integrity would certainly cover. And there is a workbook cost each year as part of this particular curriculum. What I do like though is a lot of print, and I think in a very increasing digital world, having print in front of students is an important thing for them to be able to do. They can't look at screens all day long. It's not healthy, it's not good for them, and you know, we need to have print in front of students as well. So that satisfies, if we're allowed to keep what we have, it already matches up with what we have, and it's a logical replacement for units of study in that particular situation. 95% group, again, this is the word recognition piece, if we need it in grades 4 through 6, but they've also partnered with Wit and Wisdom as well. So even though it's a different phonics program or different word recognition program, it actually is partnered just like Wit and Wisdom did with the particular program that we're going to use. So that's a positive, and we can keep the same language comprehension program on the other side of the road and get that same interaction. So when the teacher's reading their lesson plans, they'll actually say, you know, use this book, use this material, think about this from the other program, even though they're two separate programs from each other. So it is almost like they're unified. If we would have to implement this at GES, the con of this is it's a new phonics program. So, you know, it's one side of the road, and it's very similar to Foundations Integrity. It's not the same. So now you have two different things that staff are bringing into the equation. And then finally, I kind of talked about the pros of Benchmark Advanced. It is everything in one, so it is integrated. The con of this is there's a workbook cost, it's new curriculum, and we didn't feel as a group looking through this that the phonemic awareness and decoding aspects of the program were near the level that we currently get out of Foundations Integrity. That's certainly our opinion. They would argue that that's incorrect, but you know, that's, you know, a lot of people looking at that have a strong literacy background in our district and coming to the same conclusion about that particular program. But again, we may be required to have a core program, and if it is, this is certainly the best out of the bunch. And we could still use Foundations Integrity as a supplemental program in that particular situation. So I share this is the big thing that we're working on in our department, with especially in the elementary and intermediate schools. The timeline for this, the staff have had a couple months to look through it. The World Class Ed Committee met right after the winter break, and they have access to it. They're providing feedback to either myself, and I also invited them to give you feedback as board members, so you may get direct contact from members of that particular committee. That particular committee will meet a couple more times during the month of January as we get more information. So Mr. Miller, I'll make sure I send you that information after the meeting tonight. In late January, hopefully we get the state-approved list and what kind of guidelines are along with that. And maybe as early February, as soon as early February at that board meeting, we're bringing a presentation to you about what we want to purchase and how much it's going to cost for board approval. That cost could be somewhere between $200,000 and $300,000. Talking about curriculum materials for K through 6 in a literacy and writing perspective. This is a big expense that has been forced upon us.
Plus professional development.
Plus professional development. I actually kind of include the professional development cost in that, but that's still, that's a hefty number in terms of this. And I can't stress enough that we didn't ask for it, but we have to play by these particular rules. Brittany may talk a little bit about there might be some funding down the line that will offset some of these costs. It's not going to offset all of that cost. And so that's one of the things we're working on now, is getting quotes from each of those vendors, just to kind of get a sense for the first two that have come back have been in that range right there. So before I jump into two other things, are there any questions on this? Because this really does piggyback off of what Travis presented at the last board meeting.
I guess I've got a couple questions about the new curriculum adoption for science and reading specifically. And just to kind of put it in context, I've been really inspired by the elementary and intermediate school presentations and the depth which they really think about this stuff. I mean, we have awesome educators and administrators that are getting in deep to this, and you can see it in the results of our kids. Our kids are just fantastic in their reading capacities and capabilities throughout their education here. And so I'm really proud of that. And I understand where the state's coming from, because it's, you know, there's a lot of challenges with reading in the state of Ohio. And this is a lever that they have effectively to hopefully move things forward, which I applaud. But I'm just struggling because I'm not sure how relevant or important or financially wise for us, because when I think about spending $250,000 in maybe, continuous improvement is like embedded within us, and we're doing it. I think this has helped us kind of go through that process, but I'm just not really sold, and I know it's a requirement from the state perspective, but I'm kind of curious about your thoughts about that cost-benefit equation.
I'll answer that question with a piece of data. This past fall, again, this is one test on one day, and it's a state test, so you can, whatever bias you have for or against that,
Yeah.
whatever. So, you know, it's a test result that is not our test results. 70% of our third grade students passed the fall third grade state literacy assessment. Not just met the requirement, met the 700 requirement of a score of 700. That's our best score since we've given that particular, or state's given that particular assessment in the fall results that we've ever had. So our teachers are doing a great job of using Foundations in Heggerty. And so at a minimum, what I'm really afraid of is that we're going to be required to have a core program. There's nothing that's pointing that direction, but nobody can tell us that it's definitively a no either. And so that's a little bit scary, because we can partner up with a new language comprehensive program. It's that phonics piece, especially at that K2 level, that I don't want to, because we're seeing the end result of that, and that's post-pandemic. A lot of these students didn't have preschool or had a turbulent kindergarten year in school that just was not normal to what normal school looks like for kids. So to have those results, given those constraints that we are still experiencing from 2020 and 2021, points to we're doing a lot of good things with that. So it's really trying to mitigate how much change we're putting in front of our teachers, because they are doing a great job. They are 100% doing a great job. So I'll answer it with that piece of data, that I'm not asking for this, and I want to make sure that the things that we know are working for our students and our teachers stay in place.
And I applaud your kind of proactive approach to jumping on this and really getting into it, and working with the administration and the World Path Ed Committee and all our staff and things like that to kind of find the right path forward. I can imagine we're probably pretty far ahead of many other districts around the state in terms of our evaluation and implementation of this. But again, I'm sort of just really struggling, and I'm going to throw out there, and I yield to your far greater experience in curriculum and state and so forth. Like, in other areas, the state has been able to waive high-performing districts from certain requirements, whether it be around licensure and other things like that. I would strongly encourage us to request a waiver. I don't know if that's a thing that would cause more problems than it's worth. Or, given that, curriculum materials might not even be available, right, and effectively a delay. Like, is it possible to consider this during the 25-26 school year?
The law is pretty specific that we have to implement during the 24-25 school year. So
Yeah.
that doesn't say when. It could be the second half of the year,
But it seems like maybe with curriculum availability, I just don't feel like we need to rush and push all our professional development on this thing
Can I-
that's been forcing the state.
Let me just jump in real quick. So I have a couple questions, Ryan, but I'm just gonna, so the units of study that Ryan's talking about, Mr. Bernath is talking about, that's the component of the language comprehension piece. That is a program that was well regarded, but also really didn't work. I'm talking nationally, I'm talking, not specific for Granville at all, but that program did not work for many students, especially students who struggle. So it's wonderful that we have these other options besides the 3 queuing type system and the units of study, so that we are meeting lots of kids' needs, but it is also potentially in the reading world time to move to something different in that area, not necessarily in Foundations and Heggerty, but in that language comprehension area, just like what's kind of nationally and I think even globally being studied in terms of reading. I also do not love the idea of spending, $250,000 on something new. So I just had, 2 questions I just want to put out there. So if we purchased, if we didn't purchase the core curriculum and we purchased the Wit and Wisdom, is it possible, and is the idea to only purchase the 4-5, or I guess it would be 4-5-6 for the 95% group?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
We will not replace anything that we don't have to. especially at the elementary level because of the results that we're getting and the comfort that our teachers have
Right.
with that.
And the other nice thing, I mean, it's not necessarily professional development, it doesn't offset a ton of money, but there are school districts, so Licking Heights uses Wit and Wisdom, if that's where we go, but, and then you also mentioned a couple other districts use it, so at least there's these people around us that we can draw resources from. There are also community members who have expertise in those areas because they work in other districts, and, you know, so that could be helpful. My other question has to do with community members who are not on the Whole Child Committee. Are they able to also discuss this curriculum with you, or?
Yeah.
World class, I'm sorry, world class, yes, I always get that one.
Yeah.
If they're not on that committee, is it possible to give feedback or at least learn a little bit more about the curriculum before we adopt?
There is absolutely, Cecile, once that information comes out and we're comfortable that that's going to be one of the selections, we'll have that available, like we do with any curriculum, for anyone to come in and review and provide that feedback. The World Class Ed Committee membership, and if you're interested in that online, just please contact me to be on that particular committee. Is our community feedback portal for those
Okay.
ahead of time, but they will, that's part of board policy, we have to make it public and reviewable, and those materials will be here at the district office when that's available, and communicated through the school newsletters is how we'll communicate that.
Yeah, I know people were really interested in books recently and our library materials and all those kind of things, and that's something that a new curriculum will have in it. So community members should definitely reach out to see what is in those curriculum.
And we've asked all the companies for that, knowing that they'll have book lists that are in those particular programs.
Okay.
So,
And I would say that as Director Dakin gets acclimated to the new Ohio Department of Education and Workforce, one of his first tasks will be the implementation of the Science of Reading Initiative and law. And so I anticipate that you will see some additional directives, whether you see a waiver, I doubt it, just because it's something that's a priority of the governor's. So, but I think what we're trying to do is shrink the change. Not sure that we can shrink the expenditure, but we'll try to align it the best way that we can. But it's going to be a challenge, but it was a funded mandate, but the funding is myopic compared to the costs that districts are going to be able to, are going to incur.
Maybe especially districts like Vinville.
Correctly.
Can I ask you a question? Is the $200,000 to $300,000 estimate, is that for the whole shooting
that
match?
should be everything K-6,
Everything.
everything.
So if there's things we don't have to have that we're presently doing, it's going to be potentially.
Potentially a little bit less, but
And what is your take on realistically the state having something this month? Or you don't have a take? And I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
I don't know if we realistically have any expectations at this point, but we're certainly hopeful, and if not, then there needs to be some grace in terms of implementation timelines that the state's providing as well. If we can't. Not every school district in the state's going to need to buy materials, but a lot of them will choose to, depending on what's the list, because it may be time that they're doing their 5 or 6 year curriculum review for ELA, or they don't have something that's on the list, and so they have to purchase it. I feel very confident that Foundations Integrity will be allowed to stay in place, but I don't know for sure.
Right.
So that's the part that scares me.
Thank you.
And we're so good at like this continuous improvement thing, right? And we just jumped on that. We don't wait 5 or 6 years for making a change. We're continuously looking at things. So I'm sure there's, science that says there's alternate programs. I bet we're probably going to look at that. We should be, right? And I'm hopeful that this process is allowing us to do more of that, but I'm struggling with the economics and the implementation timeline. It doesn't seem like it's going to be beneficial to our students relative to the cost. Like if we could have 2 full-time staff members develop our own curriculum over the next couple of years, right? Like that would be about the same cost, and maybe might be more targeted and better. But I don't know how those creative or alternate solutions might come up to be legally responsive to the desires of the state to make sure we have great education for our kids. But I think we've demonstrated
we're there.
To answer your point, I got an email today that they're going to ask us in EMIS what programs we are using every single year, and we'll have to report on, are those what intervention programs and literacy programs are we using? Just another report that we have to fill out, but if it's not on that list, I'm sure that will come with
An audit.
something.
It will come in the form of an audit.
An audit or a.
So I guess what I would say to the Board of Education is this, and I'm using an old coaching analogy back from my coaching days, is, control what you can control. We can't control the cost, we can't control this, so we can make the best out of it, because there is a lot of data and a lot of scientific research that's not done by the companies selling these materials, but by people who are generally interested in literacy promotion, going in the 21st century, and getting away from some of the practices that maybe as a nation got us behind in literacy at a very early time. So if we can learn from that and use that to improve what we currently have, there are some things out of this that I am sure can improve our practice, and we have to find out what those are and how it fits the needs of our students, and that'll be our task over the next year. Just, their CAN professional development program that they have to roll, that will be great just to get an initial background on that particular program that we're looking at. But at the same time, we have to make it our own. And how does this work for our students, whether they're the most gifted student or the student that needs the most intervention and everything in between. And so that's our task and what we'll spend a lot of time on over the next year. I think when you're spending time and money on literacy at a young age, that is so foundational. I can think of a lot of worse things that we can spend our time and money on. So.
And the only other point that I'd make before you continue in your presentation is that had there been a process of an independent piece of legislation around this concept, then maybe we would have been able to have that civic dialogue. However, it was part of the budget bill and therefore not subject to the typical vetting process. So to your point, Thomas, some of that dialogue would have been something that school districts could have participated in and said, hey, what we're doing is working. But, that wasn't part of that process. So, Mr. Burnett, continue.
Okay, the next piece is College Credit Plus. So if you're not familiar with that, College Credit Plus is a program in Ohio where students can take courses to gain, who are high school students or even younger in middle school, take courses and gain college credit for it at no cost to the family. That's in terms of the tuition or the textbooks. Only transportation is required on the family's end. One of the things that we are looking at expanding going into next year is offering College Credit Plus courses at our high school, so that our students don't have to leave campus and go to COTC or Columbus State or Mount Vernon Nazarene, OSU Newark, or take courses online. These are just some of the courses that we're potentially interested in, and I'll explain why it's those particular courses. They really fit one of two categories. Number one, we have a teacher that's qualified to teach College Credit Plus, and I'll talk about those requirements here in a second. Or they're foundational to any major that a student would have at the college level. We still have 90% plus of our students going to 2- or 4-year colleges. And a lot of the things that we're looking at here are foundational college credit programs for even 2-year degrees, like the one that COTC is starting for their Intel Operators program. Everybody's going to have to take a Comp 1, they're going to have to take a Psych, those kinds of things for those particular programs. So if we can help students get some of those credits in high school, provide a rigorous academic experience for them, it gives them a leg up. When I was principal a long time ago, one of the things that we really expanded was the AP program. We had 2/3 of our students going out of state, and the third that was left in state, a lot of them went to private schools. The state of Ohio has done a magnificent job, in my opinion, of making public schools and public colleges and universities in Ohio very affordable and very attractive to try and keep talent in the state. And I applaud them for that. One of the things that we heard in our senior exit survey, and I know that the students think we don't look at these things, is, boy, it would have been really nice if I had more College Credit Plus when I was in high school. And these are kids who are now at the Ohio States, OUs, and so forth in the world, and they're talking to other classmates who had more of that experience available to them. Our students had it available to them, but not as much in the school embedded in their day, because the end of the day, our kids want to stay at Granville High School, and that's a positive. I mean, if they don't want to leave, that tells a little bit about the experience that we're providing. So this is a possible list that we're looking at. We're thinking about working with COTC, Shawnee State, and potentially Columbus State for those. The pros of it is very simple. Kids get college credit. We're still giving them rigorous programs. It's not a one and done test like AP. You want to see a stressed student. You want to see a student who has 3 AP tests over the course of 2 weeks. I'm not sure if that's really great for their mental health, but that's how that program is structured. If a student's going out of state, I would encourage them to stay with the AP route to get that college credit. But they know they're going to a state school in Ohio, and we hear more and more of that from our student body, and we see that in the data. That this is an option for them to get some college credit before they leave, and it saves the families some money, maybe allows them to graduate early, or at least graduate in 4 years with more credit requirements being required by colleges. The cons of this program is these credits won't always transfer out of state, but sometimes they do, depending on the college that you're looking at. The cost is a cost that is ultimately borne by the state and the district on some level. It's about $130 per student per 3-hour course. So if a student takes Comp 1, that's a 3-hour course. It's a $130 cost, plus the cost of any books that we may have to purchase for that particular course. And a barrier of teacher requirements. Teachers to teach us have to have a master's in their subject area. So they can't have like a master's of arts and education with a curriculum and instruction background. They want to teach chemistry, they've got to have a master's in chemistry. And so, one of the things we've looked at is what teachers already have as credentials, and some of those you'll see listed up there. This is not meant to replace AP. These two things will live side by side. It just is going to give kids different options for different credits at Granville High School. And one of the pros that I should have put up there as well is it helps students meet graduation requirements as well. Gives them more opportunities to complete those graduation credits potentially earlier, allowing their schedules to open up for more passion-based learning that they have as they get into their juniors and seniors as well. So we are not going to start with all of those in year one. It's just a list of potential that we're certainly thinking about, but I think it's something that you're going to see continue to grow in Ohio. And it certainly has grown significantly over the last couple of years.
So what do we have then? We have AP chemistry and we have a college credit plus chemistry. I can imagine from a scheduling side that could be a little challenging.
It's all about numbers, and it's just like any other course. I think it's going to add more numbers to they're going to be singletons in some cases. So, you're going to have situations where students want to take this, but because we have to put it there for that teacher's schedule, they may have to choose something else. But, I think like ELA 12, for example, one of the colleges that we looked at, we partnered with, they have certain requirements for students to be in that. 94% of our student body met the requirement to be in that class, and the other 6% has a chance. Like nobody was excluded at first look from taking that particular course. So if you're talking about that many potential sections of that course, that's going to be a pretty easy one to schedule and find a way in there, along with the current requirements that we have.
And this is a district, $130 is probably a lot less than having a kid take the class at COTC.
It is
right?
1/4 of the cost that they take over there.
Right.
So for every 4 kids we keep in our building to take here, that's equal to 1 student going over to COTC or an online course, and they're still in our building. The frustrating part is I don't even know why there's a cost, and this is my opinion, so I'm going to make sure I say that out loud. But we're teaching it, we're doing all the legwork. They give us a syllabus, and we get charged $130, per class per student. But it truly is. This is one of those situations that is good for kids, and it gives some kids an opportunity that maybe they can start college early, and that gives them a chance to go to college. And that's a reality for some of our students as well.
And finishing in 4 years is a real challenge in many schools and things like that.
100%
This case, you had
yes.
a head start on that. That's fantastic.
Yes.
And is the curriculum significantly different than what we would normally teach in these classes anyway? Or could we do both at the same time?
We can always go beyond the curriculum even. We just have a minimum curriculum that we'll have to satisfy. So some of the, I'll just give an example since I use Comp, some of the writing that we require of our current seniors is more than, in terms of maybe like a research paper of a certain length, more than maybe required by certain colleges. We're not going to diminish those standards. We can exceed them, but we're also meeting with those students every single day as well, where a college class only meets 2 or 3 times a week. So we can not only have the opportunity, but we can give them the support to do that. But there are certain things that will be required as part of that curriculum that certainly line up with what we're doing in our 11th and 12th grade classes for sure.
Could you co-teach with a student who's sitting in maybe chemistry, also do all the requirements in the curriculum of the chemistry for college credit plus?
Potentially.
Seems like there'd be a lot of efficiency in that.
Absolutely.
Right?
And in situations where maybe 4 kids take this and 4 kids that, that is a model that we can use.
Okay, great.
So the college has to okay that, and so we're at their mercy. Some of them are more willing to be flexible in those scenarios than others, and will take advantage of their flexibility and common sense in those situations.
That's great.
So,
Thank you.
so there'll be more about this when we get to scheduling in the high school later on. And then finally, the Power School, even though we implemented it a couple years ago, hasn't really gone away. And we're finding new ways to integrate projects. And we have 2 big projects going on here. One is the grad progress report, and that's completed at this time. The other one is grad planning and student success forum. So what we're trying to create is a place now where students can go into Power School and access themselves. How am I progressing towards my graduation plan, my graduation progress, and maybe what seals or what classes I need to take, but also starting all the way back in 6th grade, documenting their journey of thinking about careers and planning and putting that somewhere where they actually can see it and edit it every single year. So the first one is the grad progress report. That's very simply, this is what you see on the screen. We have not rolled this out to students and families. I would anticipate that happening here in the spring. Senior parents don't need to worry. If we're worried about their graduation, they've already been contacted. This is more for the juniors and below. You can see that it fills in these status bars over here, and a lot of this is automated. When a student earns a credit, when they earn a test score, it will fill these in as they've met those requirements on this particular side. Sometimes we have to put waivers in because there's a lot of different ways students can meet graduation requirements, and sometimes they're not always things that we can automate in the system. So like you see, I waived this particular student's Algebra 1 state test score. It's not because I like the student that I want to give them a break. It's because they took Algebra 1 in the year of the closure, and they got an A in Algebra 1. Well, that the system doesn't recognize that A as a way to meet Algebra 1 the way we set it up, so we have to put a waiver in for that particular student. This is a nice one-stop shop in terms of I can look at this student's information down to this point right here, and the fact that all these are filled in, this is just kind of an extra place for extra credits. All these are filled in or will be filled in at the end of the year. The student can graduate. I don't have to worry about anything else. They meet the minimum state requirements to graduate. The grad planning is where students go beyond that. They talk about their passions and what they want to learn, their career paths, and who's going to help them on those career paths, and the things we do with the counseling departments to get students thinking about that, and then getting them to reflect in a form that will stay online, that will follow them through school, and they can update it every single year, including graduation planning once they get to high school. What courses, starting as a 9th grader, am I thinking about taking as I traverse through 4 years of high school, especially with all the options we have available. They're infinite. So helping students start to wrap their head around what that might look like. So that will be completed later in the spring of this year. That will roll out to students at that point. So those are the 2 Power School projects that we have going on right now as well.
And Mr. Burnett neglected to say that he actually was the creator of this. So this was a customization that he took upon himself because he thought it was a good idea, and will eliminate about a $12,000 annual cost for a product that we were paying for. So
We haven't got feedback that they like it yet, so let's not just say.
yeah. Well, they're gonna like it.
$12,000.
Yeah,
It helps us like it so far,
yeah. So, but this is, I think what he's trying to highlight is the customization side of the equation. This is something that we could not do in Progress Book or Dazzle, but it is something that Power School allows. And there are other ways, like the grad planning and student success forums, that we can tailor to Granville with the utilization of the portrait of a graduate, with strength finders, with other ways to enhance that process that I think align with some of the things that we've been advocating for. So, well done, Mr. Burnett. Again, thank you very much.
Sounds like we or Ryan should sell this to a lot of other districts.
Yeah.
$1,000.
That might be true.
I will not set it up for them.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Whether you build the customization with other people that can use it, sure.
very much, Mr. Gwinnett. And we are going to transition to the monthly financial report.
Are you here tomorrow at 3?
All right, here we go.
Okay, moving on to the December financial report. So we are approaching the bottom of our cyclical cash balance for this fiscal year. And we'll start building back up after our property tax advance payments come in. That was one of the resolutions passed during the organizational meeting. So those will start coming in January and we'll start building that back up. But we were about $2 million above where we were last December. And that's largely the carryover cash balance that we had at the end of last fiscal year. For revenue for the month of December, really the only item to note is under all other revenue, our interest earnings continue to be about where we were last year. That's of course due to interest rates as well as having a higher cash balance that we can invest. Year-to-date revenue compared to last year, we do have, we're seeing the decrease under local taxes. That's the decrease that we saw in the income tax revenue. Again, we don't get a lot of data related to that, so there's not a lot that we can identify there. We get quarterly payments, so we'll continue to monitor that as it comes in. We'll receive another payment here in January, so we'll report on that next month. Under all other revenue, we have two kind of offsetting items, the decrease in the return of advance related to ESSER as well as the increase in interest earnings. So over to the right, I've done an adjustment so that we're kind of comparing apples to apples. So what the report is showing is that revenue is down over last year, but if we account for that return of advance, revenue is actually up over last year, and that's largely the interest earnings. December expenditures, really the only item to note here is the increase in salary and benefits, and that's related to the base increases, steps, and additional staff that we've added and discussed previously that we'll continue to see through the rest of the year. Year-to-date expenditures, again, we'll continue to see that increase on salary and benefits. Purchase service, we have that's where a lot of timing issues come in. So we have an increase there related to timing of utility payments, tuition payments that were made annually as opposed to monthly. We have also the additional payment that we had to our custodial contract that hit in this fiscal year that we'll continue to see. And then similar to the revenue side, I made an adjustment for the transfer to the capital projects fund so that we can compare a little bit more apples to apples. So the report is showing that expenditures are up $3 million. After accounting for that transfer, it's 1.1. So that's more in alignment with what we would expect to see this time of year, given the general increase in salary and benefits plus inflation.
That's really helpful to make those adjustments.
Yes.
There's so many special cases and things like that, thanks for thinking about that.
Yep. Related funds, so no changes here, but just a reminder of how we've spent. Our total allocation is about $2.9 million. We have 3 sources left to spend, largely allocated for summer intervention as well as our intervention position at the elementary. So we're continuing to spend that down. Capital projects fund, so we are about 1/3 of the way through that project. So again, just as a reminder, this was a board-approved transfer to this fund. We'll track each project separately. If there are other projects that we identify that we want to handle through a general fund transfer to the capital projects fund, we will add them and track each project individually here. So this gives a little bit more transparency into how we are spending that. Otherwise, it would just show up under the transfers, under the regular financial report. So this actually gives us more detail. The last item then is our cash reconciliation for December. Any questions or comments?
This is the time for public comments. Anyone in the audience would like to participate during the meeting, please come up to the podium, give your name, address, and you have 3 minutes. Seeing none, go to board discussion. Is there anything you'd like to?
I'd just like to, again, reiterate my thanks to Thomas and the entire board, and to Friend Cecile for stepping up and being vice president. So thank you.
I'd just like to add, my wife and I stopped by the GMS art show on Saturday, and it was great. If you have time, I would encourage you to stop by and check it out. And I guess they're going to have the high school coming up. I'm not sure of the dates, but it's a great, the site is great, and it was really nice to see the different art projects that they did, so.
And that's a collaboration between Granville Center for the Arts and the schools, and that's facilitated with Granville Center for the Arts and the art department?
Correct.
Okay.
And the high school is January 20th through the 27th. There's a reception from 4 to 7 on January 20th.
Any other board discussion for tonight? Okay, thank you. Action agenda?
Okay, item 10.01 are the board policy adoptions. There are 4 of them that I discussed in the first reading last month.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Take the roll, please.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
All right.
Thank you. Resolution 10.02 is to self-certify micro-purchase thresholds, which is a threshold of $50,000 for federal procurement.
So moved. Second.
All right, so what does that mean? Yes, I was just gonna say. What that means is Brittany's gonna explain that to you.
The federal limit for micro purchase, the requirement is to obtain 3 quotes for any purchase over $10,000. So this is specifically related to the safety grant, and the next item on the agenda is approval of an agreement. And so basically this is allowing us to move forward with this agreement under a tighter time frame than we were able to obtain multiple quotes, the vendor that we have experience working with, and this is a one-time increase to that threshold for this purpose.
So it's one time.
Yes.
Related to the safety grant that Ms. Sherburne.
Yes.
Yep. Thanks.
Discussion. Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
10.03 is the agreement with House of Security. So moved.
Second.
And this is that item that Brittany just referenced related to safety and security.
So moved.
Oh, we already have it.
Oh, sorry.
Any discussion?
Is this cameras?
Lots.
No, lost. Right, no, yeah, great.
Take the roll, please.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
10.04 is the approval of the hourly wage rate for the STAR employees, which is in alignment with the federal minimum wage.
So moved.
Second.
Can you please remind us what STAR stands for?
Student Technology Aids and Resources.
So they do a lot of break fix for the technology department.
And summer work too.
And summer work as well.
Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Ms. Deeds? Aye. Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Okay, next is the consent agenda, 11.01A through D.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I'd like to just call a couple of different, things out to for your attention. Dan and Stephanie Dodd, donation, Denison University, Granville Athletic Boosters, John Clauder, the Attorney General grant for flock cameras. All those are donations or grants that we are accepting. Obviously, we appreciate all of the free money that we get.
Not
in-
free, some
Well,
people-
it's free for us.
True. What is a flock?
The generosity.
A flock camera is a specific type of camera that is able to detect cars that should not be on property. So it's part of our safety and security plan. I would also call your attention to our national board certification or certified teacher stipend. Caleb, Mike, and Emily have gone through that process. They have to re-up, and so it expires at those dates, and then they can reapply for that process. We have a new certified staff that will be for the 24-25 school year. That is a replacement of a retirement, Tim Beck. And then we have a resignation in our maintenance technician position, so with appreciation of service, we'll accept that resignation, and we have 2 field trips. One of them is the middle school 8th grade trip, which this is the first time that we are actually using air travel for that trip versus charter bus. The charter bus industry is much like every other industry that is looking for drivers. We've experienced that pain ourselves, so it is in our best interest and the interest of our students to use other means.
Well, if I could add, I appreciate Mr. Felder doing a lot of research on that. The cost for air travel was not substantially higher than the bus travel. A little bit safer, and so taking advantage of that, is our reason to moving to that.
Absolutely.
More efficient too, to get more time.
More time on that field trip.
There was a big delay last year, wasn't there?
We've had breakdowns just about every single year that I can remember. If Dave Stewart was here, he would attest. He may be saying something online right now. But yes, absolutely, we have had issues every single year with our charter buses. And that cost is borne by the parents.
Mhm.
That's a trip that is paid by parents.
Take the roll, please.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.01, approval of the December 2023 financial report.
So moved.
Second.
Any other questions or comments?
Please take the roll.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.02, approval of the then and now resolution for front center turf field maintenance.
So moved.
Second.
And this is an item where we did actually have the purchase order in place, but it did not, it was not increased for the increase in their annual contract. So the amount exceeded what we had available left on that PO, so it requires board approval.
Any discussion? Please take the roll.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye.
Item 12.03, approval of the permanent appropriation resolution.
So moved.
Second.
We are increasing the fund 300, which is related to the athletic fund. So anytime that you see athletic booster donations, those go into the athletic fund. And so we have to increase their budget to correspond with the revenue that comes in. So that budget needs to be increased to account for some of the donations that have come through, and then also an item related to the scoreboard, which will be coming up at a future meeting that we'll discuss. So to account for those donations, we're increasing that fund.
Where are the lockers that they're supporting?
There, my
That's
understanding is that
donation.
there are various, yeah, so
Oh.
there are various locker renovations that they're doing. I can't remember exactly which one this is, but there was a donation last year and they did a portion of them at this time. There's this one, and I think there might be one other donation that may be coming for locker rooms, but they're all inside, like wrestling and basketball.
Yeah.
area.
Yeah, and they're trying to renovate and be more efficient with both the boys and the girls locker rooms.
So they took some of the old spaces out that were used for showers that weren't utilized, and they put lockers in. They took out some lockers that created more space for the coach to actually interact with this space.
And I really think, I know in the boys' locker room, the different lockers, they got better ventilation, so they're trying, so I guess over the next year or two, they're addressing both locker rooms.
That's great, that was just supporting.
Yeah.
No question.
Take the roll, please.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Deeds?
Aye.
Mr. Cron?
Aye.
Ms. Shaw?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Wolf?
Aye. Thank you, everyone.
Who am I rooting for? I'm supposed to be rooting for Michigan or?